Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and eager historians. I'm Miss Brown, and I'm going to talk to you today about some skills that you're going to need in doing a one-to-one describing the author's point of view and/or perspective as it relates to a historical document. In today's lesson, by the end of the lesson, you should be able to explain how an author's point of view shapes the way a primary source document is written. So, for our lesson today, I'd like you all to imagine that you just walked into your classroom, and in the center of the classroom is a box, and underneath it, your teacher says that there is a bunch of objects that are under this box, and that you're going to be asked to silently study the scene in the center of the classroom for 1 minute without leaving your seat. You're asked to make detailed mental notes about the colors, objects, words, numbers, and textures, and to think about these things and try to remember them using as descriptive of language and lots of descriptive adjectives as you can. The catch is, remember that no one is allowed to leave from their seat. So each student in the classroom, depending on where they're sitting, is going to have a slightly different point of view looking at those objects. And they're going to have a slightly different recollection and memory of the objects that they see in the center of the classroom. And you can see here student 1, 2, and 3, and how each of them have a different way of looking at that same cluster of objects in the center of the classroom. And so, some things, believe it or not, this activity is related to how authors record their experiences. So, I want you guys to think about the center of these objects as an experience that everyone at the classroom is sharing, but each student, remember, is looking at it from a different perspective or point of view. So, let's look really quick over these photos, and I'd like you to think what are two items that likely appeared in all three students' accounts. And what I mean by account is what the students wrote about after the items were covered back up after 1 minute. I predict that many students, or all three of those students, would probably write something like they saw a book. Perhaps flowers is something that would come up very common. Now, what I'd like you to focus on are some of the things that maybe only one of the three students would have accounted for. So for example, let's look at student 1. I notice that student 1 is really the only student that has a clear view of that magnifying glass. And student 2, for example, is really the only student that might be able to identify what is on the mug, Rosie the Riveter. So what I want you guys to take away from this experience and this imagery is that each student's written record of what they saw and what they remembered after viewing the scene was their primary source account. So when the students witnessed that scene, they saw it with their own eyes and then they wrote about it, that's their primary source account of the experience. Most of the documents that we're going to be looking at this school year in U.S. history are primary source accounts of what historical people experienced. Each student's seat in the classroom, as well as their personal life experiences that they brought with them on the day that this lesson was done, those represent each student's unique point of view, also known and very similar to a perspective. So what I want you guys to think about now is that in addition to what students could see with their own eyes, also their life experiences, their gender, race, interests, and the varying opinions of each student or author, that those different life experiences that the students brought with them, they mold how the students remember, how they talk about the words that they use when they're describing their experiences. And so their life experiences shape how their primary source is written. For example, if student 2 is like a big history buff, a big war buff, and remember, the students could only look at these objects for 1 minute, I bet student 2, if there's someone who's really into history, I bet they might even know that that was Rosie the Riveter on the mug. And they might definitely make note and remember that there's a tiny little cannon. If student 1, for example, was a student maybe who wasn't that really into history, they might say that they saw 2 books, but maybe student 1 and their experiences is that their grandfather played chess growing up. So they're really familiar with the chessboard, and they might identify that underneath all those objects, I saw a chessboard. And then lastly, maybe if a student comes to my class and they have background, they have they've done a lot of reading on Black American history. They might mention by name that book, it's not just any book, it's a book written by Malcolm X, who's a famous civil rights hero. And so I want to remind you guys again that the life experiences and who a person is when they're writing, it tells us, it reveals itself in the way that an author writes about their experiences and words that they choose. So something to keep in mind, historians, yes, I'm talking to you. You all must take into account that each author interprets, understands, and records how they experience an event in a unique way. And that is based on their own experiences and their perspective. Authors' perspectives are shaped a lot by their attributes and their experiences. These include race, gender, age, politics, religion, level of education, what time period they're writing in, the region of the country or the state that they're living in, and also their job. For example, a teacher will write about their experience at a concert perhaps very differently than an engineer would.
In the previous video, we saw that knowing the author's purpose for writing helps you understand better what you read because you know what you need to pay attention to in the text. But writers also bring their own viewpoints into their writing. Does detecting the writer's point of view help you interpret what you read? Stick around and let's see how understanding the writer's point of view can help you improve your reading comprehension. Hi, welcome back to Snap Language. I'm Mark Franco. This is one in a series of videos that talk about detecting and interpreting elements in writing that help you improve your reading comprehension. So make sure you subscribe to Snap Language so you don't miss any of our videos. The writer's point of view affects what the writer says about the topic and how the writer says it. As you know, sometimes it's not what you say, it's how you say it. Your point of view is the direction you come from or the perspective you have when you approach a topic. A poor person will look at a house and say, "Wow, what a great house." A rich man will probably say, "What a quaint little shack." So, is the house a mansion or is it just a shack? Well, neither. It's the same house, but a poor person sees it from a poor person's viewpoint. A rich person sees it from a different viewpoint. It's just a different perspective, but it can make an important difference. Our point of view colors our perception of the world. Whether we notice it or not, our points of view affect how we think and in what we believe. So understanding a writer's point of view helps you understand how that person thinks. You're able to read the author's ideas or opinions and say, "I understand where you're coming from, but what if someone has a different viewpoint?" Do writers give you the whole information, or do they give you only the picture they can see because of their own point of view? For example, take a topic such as capital punishment. Some people are in favor, others are against capital punishment. As you read a passage about it, depending on the information the author gives you or focuses on, you can pretty much tell what the author's point of view is. So let's look at this. Someone in favor of capital punishment may call it capital punishment. Someone against it might call it the death sentence. The first will focus on how fair it is to dole out rigorous justice to a terrible criminal. The other will focus on how a wrongful conviction might send innocent people to their deaths. So you can use context clues to identify the author's point of view. Once you do, you can understand better why the author may be focusing on some things and leaving other things out. The author may have a bias because of his or her viewpoint, so the author will focus on the things he or she believes to be true. It's important to know where the author is coming from or the writer's point of view. It helps you interpret the information carefully. It helps you question what the author may or may not be telling you. And this works in all kinds of situations. In 2014, a white police officer in Ferguson, Missouri, fatally shot Mike Brown, an African American man. People took to the streets in protest. In the media, some reporters focused on the events as protests, but others focused on the events as violent riots. Some articles may have referred to the protesters as peaceful, but others referred to them as angry mobs. In this article, you can see how Diane Jeanty, a reporter writing for the Huffington Post, discusses Ted Nugent's point of view while expressing her own point of view. The link to this article and other materials are in the descriptions below the video. The events are the same, so why are they reported so differently? Well, it depends on the point of view of the person talking about them. If I feel positively about something, I'll talk about it from a positive angle, and the other way around. My tone will change depending on my point of view and how I feel about it. But wait, the tone is the topic for the next video. So for now, give this one a thumbs up if you'd like, and thanks for stopping by and watching this video.
No, thank you, man. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, I just want to quickly remind you that in today's lesson, we are learning how to be essentially like a historical detective. And when we look at our primary sources, we are trying to be a detective looking for clues about author's point of view and perspective. So in order to do that, when you're given a primary source document, this is very important, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm going to repeat it. We always begin by analyzing what's called the sourcing information. And the sourcing information is oftentimes, sometimes it's just as simple as the name, the date it was published, and any publishing information, so the name of the author. Other times, there's a little bit of biographical information that's given. Sourcing information is usually at the very beginning of a document, or it's listed at the very end. Again, I want to remind you that a good historian, when they're looking at a primary source document, they don't just read it. Okay, they always go to the sourcing information and they ask themselves a lot of questions about what do they know about this source. Then types of questions we ask are like, what beliefs and experiences or biases does the author hold that might have shaped their views? And how was the author likely affected by the event that they're writing about? And remember, just like we learned in the video and also in that activity with the point of view, what a person believes and what they've experienced and who they are really shapes how they write. And that's what we're getting at when we ask you guys to describe the author's point of view. Let's try it. So we have here, this is a tweet that was written by Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and it was written on July 27th. So again, I want to remind you that I have begun this trying to find the author's point of view. I've begun by analyzing the sourcing information. So I know that Governor Gretchen Whitmer is a female, and as a female, she is definitely, as far as gender goes, she's in the minority of politicians in the country. I also know that by background knowledge that Governor Gretchen Whitmer, is a Democrat. And I also noticed that in her photo, she's wearing a mask. And so that tells me right away that if this tweet has anything to do with wearing a face mask, that she's probably going to be very supportive of people wearing face masks. So what beliefs, experiences, and biases does she hold? So again, she belongs to the Democratic Party. I happen to know, again, from my background knowledge, that some experiences that she has is that she often butts heads with our president at this time. And I do know that she is she has been criticized for perhaps being too strict about face masks. So once again, if this has anything to do with that, I have a feeling she's going to be very supportive of wearing face masks. And then, so let's take a look at this tweet. So again, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, it's a tweet. A tweet is something that's given publicly, and it's not necessarily just like, she's not just talking to politicians. She's probably talking or tweeting out and hoping many people in the country and many people in her state of Michigan will read it. So the tweet says, "This is Doug. Doug is technically wearing a mask, but because he is wearing it incorrectly, it does nothing to protect himself, his family, and his community from #COVID-19. Don't be like Doug. Wear a mask and over your mouth and nose." So I notice that this perhaps, right, a student who hadn't done any of the stuff that I did at the beginning by analyzing who she is and what she's all about, someone might, like a non-critical reader, might think that this tweet has something to do with a dog. But what I see, because I have done my sourcing information, is that I bet she's kind of using this cute little puppy picture to draw people's attention and to make them maybe feel happier and a little more lighthearted about wearing a mask. But she definitely, just as I predicted, she's supportive of wearing a mask. So here's an example. If you are given a test or an IF and you are asked to conduct a 1-2-1, if your 1-2-1 looks like this, that's exactly what we're shooting for. And that's what an exemplar shows us, is what does a 1-2-1 look like. So I want to remind you, you will always be given, a primary source document, and then you're going to be asked to describe the author's point of view. So what you're not asked to do is you're not asked to quote the author's point of view, and you're not asked to summarize the document. So we're looking for these bold words are the kinds of words that really show me what this author's point of view is, right? The word condemns, it's a nice strong and sexy word, and it really highlights like she is like speaking that people who are not wearing their masks, they're not doing, they're not in the right here. So the governor condemns the misuse of wearing face masks in public places. Notice I'm not quoting, and I'm really highlighting what this author believes based on what she's written. She's the governor. Remember, that's part of her point of view or her perspective of the state. And she wants to encourage the people of her state of Michigan to wear face masks properly and keep Michiganders safe. Okay, now we're going to look at a non-example. This is something that we want to avoid. This is a very common error that people make, ladies and gentlemen. People are reading the document. They love puppies. They're like, oh, there's a puppy here. She mentions the puppy. The puppy's name is Doug. This document is about Doug. And that kind of mistake can very easily happen if we do not remember to take into consideration who's writing it, when it was written, what we know about that author and their point of view and perspective. If you know anything about this time period that we're living in, ladies and gentlemen, public health officials are not concerned about dogs wearing face masks. Okay, that's got nothing. That is really taken this out of context. So this is a non-example. Remember, the governor condemns Doug the dog for not wearing a mask. The governor wants to keep dogs safe from COVID-19, but people aren't even putting masks on their dogs. I just want to remind you all, ladies and gentlemen, that we are always going to be looking at the author's point of view. What is Governor Whitmer's point of view? And even though Doug is mentioned and there's a photo of Doug, this document is really not about Doug, okay? All right, so once again, I want to remind you all that this is a quick tutorial to help you describe the author's point of view and perspective as it relates to a primary source document. And hopefully, let's just take a moment to review. Can you explain how an author's point of view shapes the way a primary source document is written? Thank you very much. Have a great day.